Authentic communication is a self-respecting thing to do, setting boundaries and being clear about managing, in your first example, like your own well-being, your ability to participate and enjoy a time together, right?
Yeah. How often have you said, oh, I don't care where we go to dinner, and you actually do care.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting there and you're like, God fucking damn it. And that's on you.
For sure.
And there's any number of that. And so it is clear communication is really a direct path to happiness.
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast with Stephen Leese and Shaun. This podcast is a behind the shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses. You can live with the status quo, you can challenge the status quo, or you can do what we do at Goodr and status the quo challenge.
All right. Well, before we get into our episode about communication and coaching, let's jump in with some lightning round communication.
Let's do it.
Okay. What's your favorite number?
Depends on the roulette wheel, but 3, 7, 8, 13, 23, 30, 33, 36. I play all those numbers hard.
I'll remember
and
that.
Then bang 25 if you're a Goodr.
For sure.
We're a $25 sunglass brand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice. Scale of 1 to 10, how hot do you like your shower water?
Oh, a week, like it's like a 5.
5.
Pretty cool, yeah.
Do you do the thing where you turn it to cold at the end?
I try, but it's hard.
Yeah, it is. Yep. Do you currently own any stuffed animals?
I don't think so.
Yeah. What's your favorite form of communication?
Oh, I mean, obviously, face-to-face over dinner with cocktails is number 1.
Nice.
Close 2, I do love a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a video call, a phone call.
Phone's good.
Yeah.
Also, like you said in the intro, phone works both ways too.
Yeah.
It's important. And then how often do you send a Loom video instead of a Slack?
Ooh, I mean, instead of a Slack, anytime I need to convey something with like real substance and gravity, right? So for our listeners, Loom is a video. You can record a video and just send it to somebody. And if I want to give you some, if it's really complex, a Loom's easier to explain.
Yep.
Or if it's something more difficult, direct feedback, I want to give a Loom because I can actually I can give it to you with like a nice body language so you receive it way softer.
Yeah,
So,
there's more included than just text. It's like tone, body language, intent, all that.
Yeah, I probably send 5, 6, 7 Looms a week.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So first question, George Bernard Shaw famously said, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. I think everyone can relate to that, but what comes up for you when you hear it?
Yeah, I mean the intro, right? There's the building the bridge analogy, because you need to connect yourself with the others. I think when it doesn't occur, I think a lot of times we're not being very direct. I think that it is really hard for us to actually ask and say what we want. We dance around it and, oh, it would be great if this could happen instead of saying, hey, Shaun, you were late to TWC today. You know that's unacceptable. You cannot be late again, or this conversation is going to be much more difficult.
Right.
Are we good?
Yep.
Yeah, right. and instead of being like, hey, I just want to make sure that you understand this expectation. It's like, no, just cut through it. So I would say, I think that we aren't as direct as we need to be. And on the flip side, we are not good about asking clarifying questions.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I think there's a difference between being direct and being like curt, right? Like, or being a jerk.
Being an asshole, for
There
sure.
are certain people that are like, oh, I'm just direct,
No, that's not being direct. That's being an asshole.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's for sure. That's very real. But we are trained to be so overly, I don't know, we are trained to be so overly soft that it causes us to not be able to communicate directly.
Yeah, so diplomatic that you can't even make a point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that expands so far. Like that's work life, that's personal life. I mean, it is kind of wild how we as people have a really hard time just saying for what we want, asking for what we want.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So obviously our 2 values, fun and authenticity. Communication is a pillar of authenticity.
Yeah.
And that right there says something, right? But can you expand on that a little bit? Why did we put that under there? How does that play out here?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you are to be really authentic, I think you need to be communicating clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that honing those skills is important. Going back to asking for what you want, what's okay, what's not okay. For example, my parents coming out to spend Christmas with me because the Broncos are playing Christmas Day in LA. So invited them out because we're huge Bronco fans. And my dad texted me, so I think we're gonna come out on the 21st and leave on the 30th. I'm like, you think you're staying with me for nine nights? And I called him. I was like, hey, can't wait for you to come out. I got a 4-night max at this house. So you can come out for 9 nights, but you can only stay with me for 4. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. We'll get a Marriott and we'll get a hotel. So instead of me being like, well, it's my parents and they've done a lot for me. That is all true. That is, we're not debating that.
Yep.
But I know that I would be so annoyed with this trip by the end. And so it's my responsibility to communicate clear expectations. And that is me being like my authentic self. And there's a lot of examples of that at goodr, right? I think our TWC is a really good example of clear communication. We do quarterly reviews, our one-on-one agendas. It's laced into a lot of things we do here, but really it's all geared at stripping down to like just being yourself and not pretending to be something that's not you.
Right. And authentic communication is a self-respecting thing to do. Setting boundaries and being clear about managing, in your first example, like your own well-being, your ability to participate and enjoy a time together, right? Yeah.
How often have you said, oh, I don't care where we go to dinner, and you actually do care.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting there and you're like, God fucking damn it. And that's on you.
For sure.
And there's any number of that. And so it is clear communication is really a direct path to happiness.
Yeah, for sure. I know a while back you read a book called Radical Candor that kind of fed into the ability to do this with some more skill. Can you share some of the main points that you took away from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's Radical Candor is by Kim Scott, and there's a lot of things to unpack, but really it's this idea of I have a little chart here because I think it's important to talk to, but this idea of how do you challenge directly? So you can do ruinous empathy, which is like ignoring what's going on. You can have obnoxious aggression, which is that being an asshole.
Yeah.
And kind of the cross section of like, instead of being like ruinous empathy and letting people just get away with anything or being a complete asshole, this idea of radical candor, of like just being clear and honest in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot, doing it enough that you can strip away the negative tone put on by usually when you're being more direct.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I noticed the top of the graph there says care personally and challenge directly. And that's the ideal intersection, right? Is like it's not that you don't care, it's that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. Are you the type of person that wants to be told if there's spinach on your teeth?
Yes.
Right.
How am I doing?
Great. You're doing great. I want to be told that. If my fly's down, I want to be told that. I want somebody to have the radical candor to not let me sit there for fuck knows how long with that going on.
Yeah.
And that is caring personally about this and being very direct with them. And so if we can agree, if you want that, then I think you should want, if you show up to a presentation and it is garbage or like your idea got lost, I think you want a colleague to be like, hey, I'm not sure what you wanted out of that presentation, but I found it very confusing. And instead we just, oh, good job up there.
Right.
Like you don't care about that person.
Right.
You care about making your life easier in that moment.
Right. Yeah. Or just wanting to pump someone's tires when they kind of need to be repaired.
Yeah, for sure.
Just going to push a leak through there. So obviously every form of communication has its benefits. It's very easy to send off a bunch of slacks and even maybe to hide behind them, right? But the best ideal form of communication is just in person. We can speak to each other, see, hear, read body language, all that stuff. A while back, I think it was September of last year of 2021, we asked everyone to come back into the office, right? And we went about that a very particular way, just managing all of the kind of COVID fears and all that. Can you talk through how we set expectations and the way we approach that challenge?
Yeah, for sure, right? COVID happens, our world gets turned upside down. Pre-COVID, we were a Tuesday, Thursday company. We had hybrid before hybrid was a thing, and if you work here, you only had to be in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So COVID happens, and throughout all of 2020, as we would do, company meetings via Zoom or Google Hangout, I was communicating at that point like, hey, we don't know when we're going to be back. If you want to go live somewhere else in the world, like this is actually the time to do it.
Right.
Because we don't know when we're going to be back, but we will give you a 3-month heads up. And then early 2021, so about a year after the pandemic hit America, I kind of started to kind of take the temperature, and I felt that, and this was just a story I told myself, I felt that I don't think that I think that people might think that we're not going to go back at some point. And so at that point, at an all staff meeting, was like, hey, as of right now, we don't know when we're going to come back, but I will tell you with certainty, we are 100% going to come back as soon as possible. We were in state of California, we're in LA. I'm like, when LA lifts this ban, we are going to come back 3 months after that. We will give you 3 months to make whatever plans and plan accordingly. But I'm telling you, this has absolutely happened. I was very clear and direct. And in that, as we got closer, June it happens in June, then I recommunicate, hey, we're coming back in September. It's in 3 months. If you don't plan on coming back, if you've moved and you're not going to come back, or you don't want to come back to the office, it's all good. If you let us know by July 15th, we will work with you. We'll figure out a transition. We'll give you severance. If you tell us after that, you don't get that. And it was very clear and direct. And we ended up losing 2 people. And it was all good. But in that, the communication was very clear. There was actually no room for ambiguity, right? There was no like, well, I mean, maybe we'll allow for this. It was cut and dry. It was like, we're going to do this on this date at this time. If you want to do this, this is how it works. And so that is a really, really perfect example of very clear communication, because I wasn't making anybody come back. I'm saying these are the choices you have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, there's something beautiful about that clarity. Like if you had done all that and then you said, is that okay? What do you think? You know, it would have been like, oh man, you just wiped out right at the end there. But it's so hard not to do that last part, to just be assertive and let something be what it is. Let your expectations be what they are.
Yeah, I mean, how, you obviously didn't live in LA at the time, but how was your interpretation of it being on the other side?
I was appreciative of how clear everything was, and the fact that was supporting all of our autonomy, our ability to look at the information that's in front of us and make the choices we need to make for our lives.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, I remember when I was training for my one and only 100-mile ultra in 2017. And when you're training for a race like that, like you got to put in miles. I mean, you got to put in tons of miles, where Friday and Saturday, I was running 20 miles or plus both days. And when I first started training, I was like, hey, Saturday, I'm going to run a 15 at Los Leones at 7 a.m. And people on the text thread would go, oh, well, hey, how about we do 9? Or can we meet at 6:30 instead? And so quickly I learned to be like, I am running 15 miles Saturday at 7 a.m. at this location if you would like to join me.
Right.
And I had to do, usually actually I'm pretty open to whatever people want to do, but that I'm like, hey, you have to hit this training. And so you can't leave any room for like uncertainty. And so that's a real practical example that is very similar to the COVID one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think everyone listening can probably think of something that's like immediately this applies.
Yeah. If you have a friend who's just a habitual, they show up late to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you might say, hey, let's tell this person to show up 30 minutes early. I just tell them we're leaving at 7.
Right.
And if you're not here, you're not coming with us.
Find your own transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So once we did make it back into the office, I think I started to hear you say hallway conversations, or what these little things that we were missing. It became clear that we were missing a lot, that in little ways, by not being able to be in person with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think offices I do not believe you need to be in 5 days a week. I think that's insane. I do believe they're an insanely high value to being part-time.
Mm-hmm.
We're Tuesday, Thursday. So that's 40% of the time for a lot of reasons. But one of the main ones is you miss tiny moments to have clear, direct communication in person, right? So it can be something like, virtually, so in person, somebody kills a meeting. You can grab the person and be like, hey, you fucking killed that thing.
Yeah.
That was incredible for X, Y, and Z. Now, if you're virtual, you might send Slack. It's like, hey, great job on that. It's not the same as looking them in the eye and giving them real praise.
Yeah.
Or on the flip side, being like, hey, you were really you pull somebody aside after a meeting, be like, hey, you were really unprepared for that meeting. Is everything going okay? What's up?
Right.
Right? You send that exact same statement in a Slack. It is perceived so much differently.
Yeah.
And so what you do as leaders is you actually just stop communicating that way because it is such a huge lift. Maybe every once in a while you dig up the energy, but over time, and then you just become numb to it and then you stop doing it.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that I think we're really, really missing when we are completely virtual. And I think this, if you like being completely virtual, knock yourself out. That's all good. I think that, we are trying to connect with people personally with our brand. And so we need to make sure we are connected ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. We'll post reference this study, but the idea that we receive about 10% of the intended communication through text, right? We're missing tone of voice, body language, all that stuff. And pair that with the fact that most business communication is email.
Yeah.
Slack, Basecamp, whatever it is. It's all text.
Yeah.
We're setting ourselves up for failure, for miscommunication, for tension that doesn't need to be there because we're misperceiving what someone is saying. It just seems so obvious that it would be better to be in person, right?
Yeah.
For so many reasons.
Right. I mean, you went from being remote to in person. What was your what's been the benefit for you?
Man, everything changed immediately. Not only my connection to everyone here, but my connection to my work.
Yeah.
The culture mastery stuff that could never be done remotely. It requires participation, deeply being ingrained in what's going on here and having a pulse of what we're all up to and how we're all doing and feeling about it. And it was cool to have kind of the remote version of that when everyone was remote.
Yeah.
There was no other choice, but I wouldn't make any other choice now, knowing that, okay, well, there's a way to do this safely and to stay connected to each other. And I feel like we all are more invested and we do better work when we're accountable to each other in person as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we, here at goodr, we are office Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday. We don't allow meetings unless they're working sessions.
Right.
And so, we've kind of designed our culture to actually use the communication right, when you're in person. Hey, let's do meetings. Let's do the work that is beneficial to being with each other.
Right.
And then when the days we're working remote, let's design it that way. And because both matter, because I also think that if you had to be here, if all of us had to be here all day, every day, we would be severely less productive because of the energy that's going on. But yeah, I do believe, back to the idea of communication, your point of so much, 90% of your communication's lost over text. That's very, very real. And I've experienced it in real time a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously you're doing our best to have important conversations in person whenever we can. Do you have a way that keeps you accountable to follow up on important conversations, to hold yourself and others accountable?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends, right? Where it depends on what's going on. So let me walk through some examples. So if you communicating with somebody, right? What is the trust level? If you have years of trust built up with a person and all right, so in the work, in the goodr world, hey, if I ask Kelly to do this, I know I'm going to get it not on time, before time, and it's going to be done at a high level, right? So there's no following up. There's other people that I trust. I might know they have a lot going on, so I might set a reminder to follow up, or you're right. It kind of depends. And if somebody needs a nudge, right? If somebody around here is avoiding a tough conversation, I think this is a really common one. If somebody's like, "Hey, I need to give tough feedback to this person." This happened very recently. Somebody just asked my thoughts on it, and I was like, "Oh, awesome. When are you going to do it? and they'll usually be like a him or a ha. I'll be like, cool, by the end of the day.
Right. Yeah.
Well, they're here, so let's do it by the end of the day.
At 2 o'clock,
Cool.
yeah.
Let me know how it goes.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I'll actually do is I'll push that back because they know now they have to do it because I'm expecting them to come back.
Right.
But yeah, it really, I don't know, it kind of just depends. So there's those, and then there's other inherent systems that are built in where, we talked about TW. We talked about like we have a staff meeting, so there's certain information where I'm like, well, I know I'm going to get that during our staff meeting, so I don't need to worry about it. Or I have a one-on-one with all these people every month, so there's inherent like kind of circle backs built into our culture already for certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the last point there is that if you have a tough conversation and we walk away, like you assume, Shaun knows what we just agreed to. If you follow up with a Slack and say, hey, great talking with you, here's the points we covered, that might cause a different response than you would have expected, right?
Oh, that's a really good point, right? This thing that we stumbled upon here is that I'll speak to 2 examples very clearly where somebody that I was working with directly gave direct feedback to over time, right? Multiple times. And I thought I was being very clear. I really I did.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, this isn't working. Drafted a really long Slack. Hey, these are the issues I see. Here's the issue. Here's what I need from you. Right? Like facts, thoughts and feelings. Here's how I fucked this up. Here's what I want in return.
Yeah.
Both times I spent months giving feedback verbally and I thought I was being clear. And in that moment, the person got it. They received it and end up to them resigning at goodr. And that was a good thing, right? And in that moment, I clearly was not doing a good job communicating verbally what the fuck I was saying.
Right.
And so that is a perfect example of we all communicate, we all understand in different ways. Also, as much as I prefer face-to-face, if you need to make things iron clad, a very detailed copy, we all kind of hear what we want to hear.
Right.
Yeah. What's your point of view on this? Because it has been a wild thing we kind of fell upon of like the importance of following up with Slacks.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that was a huge discovery because like you said, you can feel like you're being very clear. Both people walk away from the meeting like, okay, great, got it. And I heard what I wanted to hear. You feel like I got what you wanted to say, or maybe you pulled a little bit back on something that you wanted to land really strongly, because when we're in front of each other, it's hard to be as direct as we need to be. So the follow-up, I've even heard you say it is like, once I send it, now I'm on the hook.
I can't take it back.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a form of accountability too. It's like, all right, well, hey, we're both signing this contract of like, I've said it, I've reiterated it. Now we're both either on the same page or we got to get on the same page because it's about as clear as it can be.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and then I'll do little tricks with myself for things of, hey, remind me to tell you about X.
Yeah.
And that is like, well, I put that out and now they're going to ask me about that and I got to tell them about it.
Yeah.
And so for sure, there's like, I have little accountability things like that I do. But I do think this idea of we all communicate in different ways. And so if you keep saying something to someone and nothing is changing, that is your fault. It was my fault nothing was changing. It wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
It was absolutely my fault.
Yeah.
And so in those moments, your job is to, as a leader or as any caring person or somebody who just wants different results, you need to change how you're communicating.
Yeah. So these are coaching conversations, essentially, right?
Yep.
You're asking for something to change or providing perspective on what you see could be different. Do you have any tips on how you typically approach or prepare for a coaching conversation like that?
Yeah, I mean, like anything depends, but I think one, context is very well. One, I mean, I think just simple, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit here, but simple is always the best. So one, just context, giving anybody the information they need to understand, and it could be something to the effect of, oh, well, you don't know about this, but I do, so let me inform you. Or, hey, context of, I've been burned about this thing in the past. So context is number one. Then understanding, one thing I've learned is, what is the end result you want? And so that's vision. And so trying to give people context and then help them understand how we're going to get from A to B. And that is like, it's something I've worked on because I realized I wasn't doing a good job at actually communicating what I wanted the end to be. I saw it, but I wasn't doing good at communicating it.
Right.
So yeah, for me, it's context, vision, and then what type of execution or game plan do they need? Certain people, all you need to give them is context and the vision and a due date, and they're good. But hey, there's a lot of people here. One thing I'm focusing on right now is actually taking more responsibility for creating a game plan. Like, hey, I want this project done. Here's what I want. I want you to first create a decision matrix. So when this comes in, we know where it goes. And from there, I want you to do a 3-year line plan of these initiatives. Here's how it's going to look. And actually giving the game plan that you want. And so that's not micromanaging. It's very dependent on the situation. But if I, depending on what I'm being in that moment, what level the person's at, there's an element of game planning that needs to happen. And then the final thing is an accountability or a checkpoint. Here's the due date, or I want to see this here, or this needs to happen. And so those kind of things strung together of context, vision. So what does that look like? Help them, direct them during execution. It may be a template they fill in. It may be as simple as this should take you 2 hours. Right. That is, and then the accountability of, I need this by Friday. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Or X, Y, and Z, or what do you need from me to get this done? So that's kind of the quick version.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're like on the micromanagement front, you're not telling them how to get there. You're just telling them where they need to go. And there are certain things where, like you're saying, if I don't set clear enough expectations, it's very likely to come back and I'll be like, this isn't what I asked for.
Yeah.
So you need to be very clear in what you're asking, and where is there room for flexibility, and where are you just saying, give me this?
Yeah. But you coach a lot.
That's what I'm looking for.
What's your coaching like setup?
Yeah, very, very similar. I think context is always super important. I always think context, objective, timeline, right? What do they need to know? Where are we trying to go? And how long do we have to get there, so that they can understand how do I want to approach this? How do I need to schedule my time? And then trying to build in the opportunity for communication and renegotiation, right? Saying, okay, so we're agreeing on this thing, this timeline, this lift. How does your bandwidth look? Can you take this on right now? What would have to change? Like, just asking that question, because a lot of the time people won't want to bring it up, or they'll bring it up like 2 days later.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's time lost.
Yeah.
Let's just get there now and go, okay, cool. I'll change the deadline on that, or I'll communicate with this other person. Then I can take some responsibility for the impact that I'm having in their world, versus just being like, it's on you. Like, you didn't say anything, so how would I know? You know?
And I think there's right, to be a good coach, I mean, you have to prepare a ton. There's a ton of preparation that needs to happen to really help a person or people.
Oh, definitely. That's when I felt my worst as a leader is when I know I'm showing up in real time and like coming up with something in real time. I'm like, I got to be better prepared than this.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I completely agree. And, I think that, I don't know, the context thing I don't think can be harped on enough, because I think sometimes we just jump in, and I've been thinking about something for a long time. And so since I've already thought about it, I'm 9 steps ahead and really need to pull back and communicate more clearly. Like, let me explain to you how we got here so that you can go forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's easy to forget that, right? You just kind of expect people to be, they know all this. Like, oh no, they don't. I gotta show my work.
Yeah, for sure.
That was my least favorite thing to do in math.
Show your work.
No thanks. Got a calculator. I'm good. Yeah. So we've borrowed a number of phrases from Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. One of them is paint it done. We've mentioned that a couple times here. So how do we use that? How do you bring that into coaching conversations?
Yeah. Nicole, who's our chief of people, and she used to run the onboarding herself. I don't think she runs it as much anymore, but I know there for a long time was an example of paint it done. And it was, she asked me a question, I gave her an answer on Slack, and then she asked for me to paint it done. And then I sent back like this entire, like a detailed list of what I expected.
Yeah.
And it was an example, because in that moment, I'm like, oh, I was not being clear. She's giving me the opportunity to be very clear. And so it's really, really important it's really important to the receiver, I think, to have that term in their pocket to say, paint it done. But as a leader, use that opportunity and disconnect. You're not being an asshole. You're asking for what you want. And so I think a practical example that we could all relate to is this idea of going on a date. So maybe for your partner's birthday, you ask what they want and they say, "Oh, I want to go on a nice date."
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I will piece that together. But what if instead they said, "Hey, I want to go on a nice date." What that looks like to me is I want it to be a Saturday so we don't have to rush home after work. I want it to be around 7 o'clock. I want us to have cocktails beforehand. I want to make sure we're Ubering there. I want it to be one of these 5 restaurants because I know they have a tasting menu and I love that. X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It went from you wanted a nice date to getting exactly what you want.
Right.
You're painting that done.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If you're the partner of that person, you're like, fucking thank you.
Totally.
Give
What
me
a
a
relief.
pen and paper.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay, I'll make this happen.
Yeah.
And so that idea of painting it done is so crucial.
Yeah, for sure. If you have a clear picture in your mind, recognizing you're using words to paint a picture in their mind. And so if you use only a few, you're going to get like a crayon drawing back, right?
Yeah.
So, but the more clear you can be, the more likely it's going to turn out the way you hoped.
Yeah. And then going back to like the trust, hey, the more you trust somebody over time, you actually are. I'm way more free. Hansi, who plans Goodr Stock, which is our quarterly staff summit, and we do a thing called speed dating.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, everybody would get in front of the company, and they would like celebrate from their last quarter. But as you get to 100, 120, 130, we can't do it the old way.
Yeah.
And so she asked me, it was just taking too long, and a year ago or 6 months ago, I don't remember when we changed, but she asked me, "Hey, we need to change speed dating. What do you love about it?" And my response was, she's like, I want to change it, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page. I go, "Hey, the only thing that I really care about is that there was a moment where everybody at the company is kind of like on stage, or like they have like, you could pick your walk-up song. Like I just want to capture that one moment.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else can be changed as long as we can give that one moment."
Yeah.
And what we came back with was wild. I couldn't have painted it done that good.
Right.
It was so much better, but that was because like I trusted her over a long amount of time.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I don't need to paint it done. Like, this is the one thing I care about. So if this is important, we're good. And that's a perfect example of building trust over a long amount of time, communicating over a long amount of time, and then handing over and being magically surprised.
Yeah. And you were giving her ownership and autonomy. You painted down the part that was important to you, but then you were like, all right, as long as this tree's in the photo, we're good.
I'm good.
You just paint the rest.
Yeah.
I don't even care what the weather's like.
For sure.
Yeah, nice. So there's a lot of ways that projects go off the rails, and usually that is a breakdown in communication. Do you see any consistent patterns in a place that something might break down?
Yeah, I mean, consistent's interesting. I think it's going to be probably one of a few things. For sure, there wasn't clear expectations that we didn't paint it done. So that's for sure a thing that first happens. And I think the more thing that happens more is we don't have well enough checkpoints put in at the right moment to kind of catch stuff ahead of time. And I think that depending on your role in this, instead of building those checkpoints and having the harder conversation earlier, it's more likely to avoid that moment of uncomfortableness. So I would say, to answer your question, I do think it could be that we're not being direct. I think we're not being direct or bringing it done. That's one way. We are not setting enough milestones and check-ins. That's another way. We're not actually calling out what the issue is in the moment. That's the third. I mean, any of those things, I don't know. I think it kind of wraps up in that three. I mean, somebody in there might not be doing their job, might be half-assing it, but you didn't set up the checkpoint. So
right.
yeah. I think it really, really depends. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's also the bandwidth side, right? When we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to pretty much everything else.
Yeah.
But we don't think of it that way. And so it's easy to keep saying yes and then realize too late, oh, I can't. I'm probably going to do all this poorly, or certainly some of these things aren't going to happen. So how can we support that side of the conversation, the bandwidth and kind of honesty side?
Well, I think there is a lot of, right, you can't over communicate. And so there's a So I'll take a couple examples. If you're communicating, usually everybody is very understanding, right? Like, hey, FYI, I told you I didn't get that by Friday. There's no way.
Right.
So, one, I think the supporting of being open to people renegotiating deadlines and just being like giving that a practice of like, hey, just give me FYIs. I mean, I care more about FYIs.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really big thing. Or in the communication vein, it's not an uncommon thing where a leader will come into my office and be like, hey, so-and-so is going to present at this meeting, and I want to let you know it's going to be garbage. I know it's garbage. I will fix it, but I want them to fail in this space. And I'm like, cool. So then instead of me sitting there and being pissed off, I'm like, oh, Shaun's going to fix this.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think just those little FYIs are really, really important. And you know, I think like on that side, like if you, from a bandwidth, you can obviously do the very clear thing, which is I don't have the bandwidth. I need to renegotiate this timeline. And as a leader, you should have the nuance to understand what has to be negotiated, what needs to be negotiated and what didn't. But really, I mean, I think just more FYIs actually can save a lot of heartache here.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing for you is somebody on your team to you to be expecting something and not deliver it.
Mm-hmm. And have never heard anything about it in the meantime, and to know not only did they not say anything, but they were probably really stressed about it that whole time. That sucks. That's no way to be.
Yeah.
Would have much rather had that conversation and been like, hey, let's move that deadline or communicate with the other team or whatever.
Yeah, there's the bandwidth thing. I also think a big thing that supporting is encourage writing stuff down.
Yeah.
This is a very real thing. This happened in a sales meeting years ago when I used to be on the road when we, with account managers visiting retailers. One of the former person on our team in a meeting with one of our biggest accounts, and sitting there over lunch, and we promised 7 things to this account. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is fascinating. This person's not writing anything down. And we leave there. I go, cool. So you promised 7 things to this account. What are they? Got like 3 of them. I was like, here's what they are.
Yeah.
It's this, and this. If I'm ever in a meeting again and you're not taking notes, it will be your last meeting at goodr.
Yeah.
And that was a very direct communication, because in that moment, we just like that person on our team lied to our account, right? Like what they mean is that they promised something they're not going to deliver on.
Right. Because they're not going to remember.
Because they're not going to remember. And so one way you can support as a leader is when somebody's, I mean, I'm sure you've been in the room when I've done it, where I'm like, I'll wait while you get a pen and paper.
Yeah.
It's wildly concerning to me that you're not taking notes right now. So that's another thing of, I can paint it done all I want. If you're not capturing this, it's really quite irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on that note, anything that we should return to or you didn't get to answer the way we were thinking you'd like to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think here. I would say that any way you can build in, one, I think when people hear people being direct, we associate it with an asshole nature. And so just, I would actually ask, be aware when you're making that assumption of like, well, Steven was an asshole telling that person. I was like, actually, I was being very clear with that person. They did something unacceptable. And you can choose to say I was being an asshole, or you can be like, well, I actually gave that person a gift in that moment. I gave them the gift to understand what the expectation is here. So I would just understand what that is. And so I would say that's number one, but also whatever you struggle with communication wise, you can usually build in a system to help that, right? Here's a perfect example. I meet one-on-one with all the flock stars once a month, with Hannah, my assistant, once a week, with all the flock leaders once a quarter. And we all have an agenda, and in there, it's like, what cool shit is going on? Because I don't want to just jump into business. I would actually just like to hear what cool stuff's going on. There's a section that everybody has to give me feedback, appreciation, and coaching, and I do the same to them. So on and so forth. So this is an agenda that is expected to everybody, that we both live by. That was created because I wanted to make sure that I was making it okay for people to give me feedback, where I'm saying, hey, let's just get used to this. It's all good.
Yeah.
And then also, I was having a place where I know that if I need to give you coaching, I've created a space for it.
Yeah.
that is a system that really helps build great communication for me. And so understand where you're struggling with, and then build in that communication. And right, if you're worried about communication with your partner, you can set up a set of questions to ask once a week or once a month or once a quarter, right?
Yeah.
I've talked about that on here before. You can usually juke this stuff, and you do it enough where you don't need the system anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note too, with practicing setting clear expectations, I've noticed a lot of clear expectation setting that at one point felt like it was coming out hot, right? Because it's hard to set clear, direct expectations with people. And then over time you realize, hey, it's not okay to be late to meetings. You got it?
Yeah.
Great. It's like, it doesn't even hurt to say it or to hear it because you're just sharing information. Like, hey, I need you to be taking notes on this. Cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you can invite people into the process of understanding the expectations without feeling like I'm being a jerk by saying what I need and want in this situation.
100%. We've created the ecosystem here where this type of communication is the expectation, and it takes the edge off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just practice, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Cool. Any other advice or next actions for folks who are listening?
I'm good.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Steven. Thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time, be excellent to each other.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Gooder podcast. To submit questions for the podcast, learn more about our culture, and learn how you can status the quote challenge, head over to goodr.com/culture. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening, including on YouTube, where you can now watch all of our new episodes. Who knows? You might even catch a glimpse of Carl at our headquarters if he's not already passed out at the tiki bar from all the margaritas.